All right, good evening, everyone. Today is Monday, April 22nd, 2024. I've got 7:01, so we will call the Committee of the Whole to order. Start first with items from the Mayor's office. I believe we have a proclamation. Madam Mayor.
Thank you. I do appreciate, I know we don't typically do proclamations on Committee of the Whole evenings. However, last week, the person to whom I'm going to give this proclamation was not able to make it, wasn't feeling well, and we have her luckily here with us this evening. Today is Earth Day. Friday, April 26th is Arbor Day, and it's a special observance that was created in 1872 to encourage individuals and organizations to go out and plant trees. 152 years later, the day is celebrated around the world. As we all know from our sustainability discussions, trees are really critical to creating healthy, safe, connected communities. They provide oxygen, they absorb carbon dioxide, they provide natural habitat for wildlife, they provide shade, which cools cities by up to 10 degrees. They also create connected communities in the sense that they encourage outdoor physical activity. They have been shown to reduce stress, they increase property values, and they also increase civic pride. We all know that. In 2023, Gahanna was again named a Tree City USA, which is a designation given by Arbor Day Foundation to communities and cities that demonstrate a commitment to planting and maintaining trees within their community. This was the 34th year in a row that the City of Gahanna has received that designation. And in the City of Gahanna, we are extremely fortunate to have a highly skilled and respected professional leading our forestry efforts here in the city and leading the initiatives that we have in the city to grow and to maintain and protect our tree canopy. Julie Praderi, as you all know her, was first hired by the City of Gahanna in 2018 as our forestry foreman. At that time, she was the only full-time person in the city dedicated to forestry work. And she was responsible at that point, still is responsible, but all by herself. You think about all the street trees plus, at that time, 750 plus acres of parks and maintaining all of that property. Julie has been dedicated to her craft, and she set a goal when she was hired to make sure that we had at least 100 trees planted every year. She has achieved that goal. In 2023, last year, her team planted 108 trees around the city and pruned 276 trees, which is equally important because that helps trees to go strong and properly so that they maintain and last for many, many years. It was her vision to establish a level 1 certified arboretum down at Creekside, which I think opened in 2021. I believe that is when that opened. As you know, the Arboretum identifies more than 40 varieties of trees, and it really transformed a park area that was just kind of a nice place to stroll, still is, but it also has become an outdoor educational space. Julie and her team regularly host students from our elementary schools and even middle schools down there for classes. She can regularly be seen down there as well, and every Arbor Day, she attends, if not one, but 2 elementary schools in our district where they plant trees. She educates them not only on how to plant trees and care for them properly, but the importance of trees in our community. It was because of these efforts and her efforts to grow the forestry division and grow our city street tree program that Julie was recognized as a top 30 Parks and Recreation professional by the National Recreation and Parks Association earlier this year. She's in there, that's 30 under 30. There were more than 100 nominations from 26 states in our country. She was the only candidate who was selected in the state of Ohio. 30 under 30 right here. She might be still many years to go in her career, but she is highly respected as a professional in her industry. She serves on multiple regional committees. I didn't know you were on the City of Columbus. I just found that out. I had no idea. I was talking to Troy. He told me that. But she is regularly consulted. Agencies call her from all around the state to ask for her opinion on forestry issues, and we are blessed to have her as a member of our staff. So I typically will present an Arbor Day proclamation at a school with Julie, But given this special recognition that she has received, I think we all felt that she deserved this special recognition in front of council tonight as well, to present her with a proclamation for Arbor Day and to express our heartfelt appreciation and gratitude. Julie, come on up here. To Julie for her work in enhancing our Gahanna community and for the extraordinary efforts that she has demonstrated to build and protect our tree canopy. And we are just so very, very grateful to have you as part of our team and our Gahanna family. So I'm going to present this Arbor Day proclamation to you in recognition of all of your efforts. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess, any comments from my colleagues?
Julie, we saw some of your work over at McCorkle Park recently. I think those went in. I just saw the tracks from the machine going through there, so just a hat tip to you for a job well done.
I don't know that there's anything else that can be added other than thank you and congratulations, very well deserved, and we appreciate all that you do. Yes, Ms. Bowers.
Yeah, just to, I think, piggyback on the mayor's comments, Julie, the tree canopy and the assets that we have in the trees in Gahanna is so valued by our residents. And I think that everyone on this dais recognizes how important your role is in maintaining one of the most important assets to all of our residents. So we are very grateful for your work, and we recognize the importance of the work that you're doing and how much our residents value it. Thank you.
Yes, Mrs. McGregor.
I just appreciate you planting the trees. I read a story one time, it was a 50-year-old man planted some acorns beside his driveway, and everybody said, you know, you're never going to leave, these will not even, you'll never see them grow tall. But by the time he was 76, there were 26-year-old trees beside his driveway. They're tall oak trees, and his grandchildren enjoyed them, and I thought, you know, that's just the hope of the tree, is that they will grow not only for you, but for the children and grandchildren that follow us. So thanks for planting trees.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and congratulations. Thank you. Next, we will turn to items from the Department of Public Service. Good evening, Director.
Good evening. I have two items for you this evening. The first item is an ordinance supplemental appropriation for the water meter fees. The Department of Public Service has received funds over the last quarter from the water meter fees for 2024 quarter one. These funds are currently unappropriated and unencumbered. The department respectfully requests an ordinance to supplement or for supplemental appropriations. That's the first one.
Any discussion on that item? All right. On for consent on the 20th then? All right, thank you. Next item, please, Director.
Second one is a motion authorizing the city of Gahanna to participate in the Southwest Ohio Purchase for Government. That's the SWAP 4G for road salt cooperative bid for the 24-25 winter season. Unfortunately, we're already preparing for next winter. So,
Any discussion on this item? Consent, this is just a motion, so consent on the 6th. All right.
thank you.
Thank you, Director. Next, we will turn to items from the Department of Engineering. Good evening, Ms. Wright.
Good evening, Chair Weaver and members of council. For those of you who haven't heard me yet, my name is Paige Wright, and I am the Transportation and Mobility Engineer for the Department of Engineering. And I am here to introduce our thoroughfare plan. So, the administration section of code requires that the thoroughfare plan be formally evaluated every 10 years, and we are due for a formal evaluation. The Department of Engineering submitted a request for qualifications in December of 2023 and received 4 responses. Of those 4, we shortlisted and interviewed 3, and ultimately Burgess & Nyepel was selected as the best candidate. Burgess & Nyepel has anticipated a 12-month schedule with a planned adoption in 2025. part of their scope includes 2 presentations, 2 council, 1 intermediate, and 1 final. Funds for this project were appropriated as part of the 2024 budget, and administration is requesting legislation to award and enter into contract with Burgess & Nyepel, as is required by the procurement policy for professional services contracts in excess of $250,000.
Thank you. Any discussion on this item? Yes, Ms. Jones.
I just had a question on if we've ever worked with Burgess and Nyepel before, or would this be a first?
I don't believe so, at least not since I've been here. Tom, are you aware?
Good evening. Burgess & Nyepel has performed sewer evaluation studies for the city of Gahanna in the past. So they're a multidiscipline firm here in Central Ohio and have performed transportation, utility-related services, not only for Gahanna, but across Central Ohio and across the country.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Is there,
Ms. Barrows?
I apologize, I may be missing this in my packet, but what was the range of proposed fees for the services from the contractors that submitted bids?
I don't believe we have the range listed, but it was 250 to that 280, and then we ended up with the 312 with the contingency.
Okay, thank you. And is there a greater scope with the Burgess and Nyepel proposal compared to the lower
Yes.
projected costs?
Let me find it. So item 433 and item 434, the prioritization matrix and the key performance indicators were outstanding from Burgess and Nyepel's contract, as well as there is an additional, I believe it is, yes, phase 6, if authorized, alternative analysis modeling.
And is that included in the total cost?
Yes, that is included in the total cost.
All right, thank you.
So are we essentially saying they offered those extra that other
Yes,
people we went out to did not?
that is correct.
Okay.
Anyone else? All right. On for first and then consent on the 20th, or? Okay. All right, consent. Thank you very much. Next up, we will turn to items from the Department of Parks and Recreation. Good evening, Director.
Hello, good evening. I have 2 items for you. Both are supplemental appropriations. The first one is I am really loud this evening. Excuse me. The trailhead is a item that is identified in the 2025 budget. The request is to move it ahead due to a grant award through the NatureWorks program, the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. We did receive funding through the NatureWorks program of $95,746. Due to the grant award, we would like to advance the project into the 2024 year. This is a project to help aid in the mountain bike trail, which is expected to have to begin construction in 2024. It's also at a location where it can aid the Big Walnut Trail through Academy Park. So with that, the administration is respectfully requesting a supplemental appropriation in the amount of $95,746, which is the grant award, to be dedicated to a NatureWorks account, which is a requirement of the grant fund. And for the remaining amount of the total project, which total budget of the total project is $175,000. So the balance of what we did not receive the grant award through the capital improvement fund.
Thank you, Director. Any discussion on this item? Mr. Schnetzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director, just a quick question, if you know at this moment in time, what's the general location that's anticipated for that trailhead?
The trailhead is expected to be, if you're familiar with Academy Park, near the playground.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments on this item? Mrs. McGregor.
So we will upfront the 95, and then they will reimburse us for the 90.
That is correct, once the project is complete.
I'll just add, wonderful to see grant dollars coming into the city and being used and allowing us to move these projects forward. So I appreciate you and the administration's efforts in finding those grant dollars and bringing them back to our community. I think that's wonderful, and I'm excited to see this project move forward. So thank you very much. So on for first on the 6th and then consent on the 20th? All right, thank you. Next item.
Thank you. Second item is another supplemental appropriation. Similarly to the previous discussion, the Woodside Green Pond has a project that is slated for 2024, and that is ultimately a dredge project in order to improve the overall systems within the pond. It was identified that through that alternative analysis or research that what we need to do in order to determine the best approach at completing that project, that if we paired the Gahanna Park ponds along with that research, that it's a cost savings. So we would like to advance that Gahanna Park project, which was previously slated for 2025, to advance that to 2024. So we're requesting an ordinance to supplemental appropriation in the amount of $175,000 using the Manor Home TIF fund from the unappropriated unencumbered balance.
Thank you, Director. Any discussion on this item? Mr. Renner?
Yeah, Director, thank you so much for bringing this item up. I'm sure it's definitely needed, especially at Woodside Green Park. So this is monies to do the research, or is it actually to do the research plus the planning plus the actual work?
It would be for the full total project. So right now, and I will state that in the expectation of what the outcome is, there is potential that we will request additional funding for the actual construction or the actual dredging of the project. That is ultimately to be determined. So the $175,000 is not just for the research. To answer your question, we do hope that we have the funding in order to complete the total project.
Okay. The other question I had is that whenever you do these types of projects, is you're sort of lifting the curtain back a little bit, among the community to actually see. Are there points of interest that could be, or are there going to be communications for the community to help them understand not only why are we doing this, but how to help them understand the bowels, if you will, of the ponds and all that kind of stuff?
We definitely see this as an educational opportunity just to understand why we're doing it. It is a costly procedure. However, it is necessary in order to be responsible for our assets. So definitely see an educational opportunity, but then also for Woodside Green specific, there's the ability to even expand and improve the recreational use. If you go to Woodside Green on a nice day, you're going to see somebody fishing out there. So we wanted to just improve their experience while they're there.
Right. My final question is that a lot of times the silt and debris is actually also nutrient rich. Do you guys have plans to do what to do with this stuff?
So part of that research will be to identify if we are able to use the dredged material. It will be studied to make sure that it's, of course, safe in order to reintroduce. Woodside Green specifically, there's some opportunity to potentially rebuild the banks of the pond if the dredged material is appropriate to do so. So that is considered and will be considered as we move forward with the project.
Okay, I'd be interested to hear about that when
Yes.
we get there. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So, Mrs. McGregor.
Will this look at like why, I mean, I know Woodside Green is probably 50 years old, but why the Gahanna Park's ponds have to be dredged this soon? I mean, after they were, is it like this, is it infiltration of silt from the surrounding areas, or?
So there's a lot of different reasons why it happens. Obviously, any type of construction will increase the sediment. So we took the opportunity to understand from a bathymetric survey to understand the depths of what the ponds were. And I will say they're far better than what Woodside Green was, and that's what we expected. But it is, rather than waiting till it gets to a point that it's far beyond, it makes more sense to evaluate it now and take a proactive approach. And that way we can continue to evaluate it and make sure that we're managing them on a better time frame.
When they built manor homes, did some of that drain into those ponds? Is that,
So they're stormwater ponds.
okay,
Yes.
gotcha, thank you.
Ms. Bowers?
Yes, just very briefly, and I think kind of just as a point of order, and I can't recall if this has been in front of council yet, but there will be an amendment to the capital improvement plan related to this, and this item has previously been discussed with the advisory committee. So I just wanted to make sure that point of information was just shared.
Thank you.
Anything further on this item? All right, on for first and then consent on the 20th? All right, thank you very much, Director. Next up, items from the Department of Public Safety. Good evening, Chief.
Good evening. Our first action item is the 2024-2025 School Resource Officer Agreement between the city and the Gahanna Jefferson Public Schools. This is agreement essentially remains unchanged over the previous, I believe, last 4 years. We did review with the city attorney's office. We made some clarifications regarding the direction of overtime. The total contract amount is $225,087.05. It represents a little over $8,000 an increase over the previous school year contract. This covers 75% of the first officer and 50% of the second officer that are anchored at Gahanna Lincoln High School. The agreement was presented to the school board and passed at their regular business meeting on the 18th. So our ask is for council to approve the contract, and this will go into the 25 school year. And I can't believe we're already in the 25 school year.
Any discussion on this item? Ms. Bowers?
Yeah, Chief, thank you so much, and thank you for dedicating staff to this important aspect of public safety. There was a resident had a question. If you could just speak a little bit more to our SRO program and how our school resource officers are received in our district, and the history that our officers have within our district.
So the program dates back now about 20 years. The contract and the cost-sharing model is about 15 years. The entire intent of the program was really not to put any type of enforcement mechanism in the school, but rather, one, a safety and security measure, obviously as a deterrent, but for our officers to engage in educational opportunities, for them to be seen as mentors, to work with staff on safety measures, to be preemptive in problems that may arise. Regardless of what happens in our schools, there are calls for service that happen. And I believe that through the success of this program and some things that we've just done this past year, that we're able to maximize their efficiency within the schools as really, essentially guardians, to embrace those tenets of community policing within the school system. On any given day, we have about 10,000 students, teachers, and staff in all of our educational facilities here in Gahanna. That's a population center that's larger than the city of New Albany to the north. I believe that this program has stood as really an example of what a school resource officer program is. This past year, we worked on the first time we've done it, and it was all staff right in the preceding days before the school year started. We did a safety program that we developed internally with a team of our officers, our SROs, our training staff, along with key members of staff and teachers at Gahanna in the district. We worked off the CRACE model, the Civilian Response to Active Shooter Environments. We worked on that program. We also, with the schools, rolled out their common language lexicon for emergencies that may arise in a building. So we've made a lot of progress this year in trying to get all the buildings kind of all talking the same language, being prepared for emergency situations, and that develops rapport between us and our combined staff.
Yeah, thank you, Chief. This past weekend was the 25th anniversary of the Columbine shooting, and so I just remain grateful for the close relationship that our district has with our police department and the approach that you and all of your officers take to holistic safety in our community. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on this item? I'll just add my thanks as well. As a graduate of Gahanna, I certainly remember walking the halls and many good conversations with Officer Blamer at the time. And so it was always not only a reassuring presence, but also, as the chief said, an educational opportunity for students who interacted with the officers. So thank you very much, Chief Spence, to you and your team. And on for first and consent on the 20th, okay with everybody? All right. Next item, please, Chief.
The second action item relates to peace officer training funds. Within the Ohio Revised Code and the Ohio Administrative Code, there are provisions for the direction of continuing professional training for all peace officers in the state of Ohio. The Attorney General is tasked with directing what those hours are and how those are achieved. Last year, or moving into this year, 24 hours were directed in calendar year 23. We achieved all of those hours, and I would say we train above and beyond that. We spread those hours out over 4 in-services, so there's 40 hours of staff training. Annually, we achieve about 55 hours of training across the board for all of our staff. Unfortunately, sometimes it's a little bit of guesswork because the reimbursement dollars that are in the Ohio Revised Code are oftentimes cut or they're reduced. So in our budget forecast for 24, we anticipated receiving about $23,000. This year, we received the full amount for all of our training efforts, which came to a little over $87,000. The request before you is to supplementally appropriate that additional $64,000 into the AG's office training fund.
Thank you, Chief. Any discussion on this item? All right, seeing none, on for first and then consent on the 20th. All right, thank you, Chief. Next item, please.
The third item is requesting a resolution in support of to adopt the 2023, 2024 Franklin County Multi-Jurisdictional Hazard Mitigation Plan. This study was undertaken in 23 by Franklin County Emergency Management, working in conjunction with Terra Tech. The purpose of this is primarily around flood mitigation and the hazards associated with flooding. Each jurisdiction was tasked with completing a number of surveys that went into jurisdictional annexes for each jurisdiction that makes up the plan. Obviously, with Gahanna's proximity to the Big Walnut, how our floodwaters are sometimes related to upstream releases from the dams. Gahanna plays a little more critical part in making sure that our infrastructure is documented, that those mitigation efforts are documented. The entire purpose of this plan is, should there be a flood situation that requires or that would qualify for federal disaster mitigation reimbursement, the adoption of this plan is key to qualifying for those federal funds. The plan is very lengthy. I included a link. Volume 1 essentially is the overall county plan and speaks to everything from, topography, geography, demographics, jurisdictional makeups. Volume 2 is where the individual 42 governmental agencies have their annexes. Some are very short because they don't have flood risk, and some are more detailed.
All right, thank you, Chief. Any discussion on this item? Mrs. McGurk?
I would just like to, flooding is really a big thing in Gahanna, and, the last couple weeks, we've had quite a bit of flooding throughout Gahanna. I know our creek was quite swollen during a couple of the events, but I ran into a lady, she was coming at the Historical Society, and her father was Jim Dysart, and he was a council member for, I think, 16 years, probably in the 60s and 70s, and he lived at the corner of Carpenter and Shoal. And she said in the flood of 1959, she was a little girl, and that's the rock at Carpenter and Mill Street. That's the plaque marks the high water mark. And Mill Street was flooded side to side, and in fact, there were some homes where people couldn't get out. And she said she remembers her dad taking a boat, and they rode up and down the area, and they rescued people that couldn't get out of their homes. So that's not that long ago. So I'm glad we have these plans in place, because it's easy to forget how high the water can get.
And we actually, working with the fire department, we had 2 water rescues related to the high water these last couple of weeks. So, I mean, it's a timely presentation. So, again, our ask is for a resolution from the body, and this helps us in disaster recovery efforts.
Any further discussion on this item? All right, on for consent on the 6th then for this one. Thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, discussion item, Arts Policy and Public Arts Advisory Committee. I believe Mayor Jadwin has handed out an updated draft at the dais and circulated that among everybody. Thank you very much, Mayor, for doing that. For my money, just with a quick skim over the changes, it looks like the big change is the definition to what is considered temporary art versus permanent art. Temporary art being that which would only be public art, that would only be on display for 6 months or less.
Correct. I think the previous draft, we said 1 year,
Yes,
and we
ma'am.
did modify that to 6 months because I think that was more reflective of temporary. The other changes, this is largely the same thing that was presented back on, I think we discussed it March 25th. I sent it to council March 29th. At that March 25th meeting, there was some discussion about the zoning code, because that was around the time we were passing the zoning code as well. So based on those discussions, Director Vollmer and I met with the Director of Planning as well as his team, just to really make sure that we understood any potential implications of the zoning code, how that would potentially impact this policy, and as a result, just a few minor changes were made. You see, now we reference that there would be compliance with applicable zoning code and requirements as well. The new draft, again, with I think 4 minor changes, I believe has been reviewed and signed off by the city attorney. So Director Vollmer, I don't know if you want to step up and just kind of walk through the changes if you think that's helpful, or unless council has any other questions around some of the changes.
Maybe why don't we walk through the changes and then we can go through questions. I know I have some. Does that work? Good evening, Director.
Good evening. So I've highlighted the changes in the draft, but I'll just go through them briefly. So in definitions, at the conclusion of last meeting, City Attorney sent us language to add to the definition of public art, so it complied with the zoning code that goes into effect on May 1st. Again, changed the temporary art, reduced it from 1 year to 6 months. On page 2, under policy section 1B, we added that the PAC shall perform the following functions as necessary, and highlighted says including creating and using a singular criterion-based double-blind evaluation process. Under Part C, right under there, in addition to make sure that zoning code and planning commission procedures are followed, that it would, the city's program administrators to ensure compliance with applicable zoning code and procedures. The rest remained unchanged from the last draft that was submitted.
All right, thank you, Director. Open up to discussion among my colleagues here. Any questions or comments for the administration? Yes, Ms. Bowers, and then Ms. Joe.
Yeah, just a quick question about one of the changes, and Director Volmer, Mayor Jadwin, perhaps, I don't know who the question is best suited for, but could you share with me how the first change, designated by the city as a public art mural, how would it be designated? What's the mechanism for it, something to become a designated public art mural?
Do an answer that. So that was part of that was a change that really was, I think, implemented as a result of the zoning code discussion. So if, for example, there is a mural that is sought to be placed on the side of a building, yes, it's private property, but it is public facing, so it becomes public art. It would have to go through the zoning code process. It would go through the process that's identified in this policy. The city would adopt it as public art and designated, so it wouldn't necessarily be on city property, but because it is public facing, it would become public art, and that is how we would coincide and comply with the zoning code provisions as well.
So this is intended to encompass any publicly facing visual art that is on public or private property?
No. This is only when the zoning code says if the city adopts something as a public art mural. So if the city does not adopt something as a public art mural, that business that's putting paint on the outside of their building will have to follow the zoning code and planning commission process, which this would as well. So in my mind, you see it, the city could solicit a private business owner and say, like, we would like to put a public art mural on your building, or somebody could approach us and ask for it to be designated as public art. Either way, it'd have to go through this process. If somebody doesn't want to do that, they would need to follow the zoning code, planning commission requirements.
What is the mechanism for that designation? Is it administrative action? Is it resolution? What's the mechanism to designate the?
It would be the process that's outlined in this policy with the formation of the PAC, for lack of a better word, where they would review the artwork and make a recommendation to the program administrator, who then ultimately would make that final determination.
Can I
Yeah.
chime in here?
Yeah.
So the zoning code is what indicates that public art murals, defines that term and creates that as a function. It is absent a direct procedure or mechanism for how it becomes designated. So on the administrative side, the PAC would designate it as a public art mural, and somebody who is seeking to do that would go through that. But the zoning code itself is absent on a mechanism itself.
Okay, thank you. The only other question I have generally about this, and this is for City Attorney Tamalarison, is what is being presented to us your recommended best practice, and/or does it meet effective criteria that you believe is appropriate for the city to adopt?
I think that this policy is one option in pursuing protection for the city in litigation about free speech and public art. I believe this is the most cautious approach to call it all government speech, and would provide us the most protection and latitude in selecting art.
Okay, thank you.
So Ms. Jones, you had,
Yeah, so I think that still, we changed to 6 months, but the PAC process doesn't apply for temporary art still, is that correct?
Correct.
And can you just share a little bit of, I guess, the why behind the process not applying for temporary art?
There are a number of programs, I believe, that are in place, such as the Story Trail, snowplows, the painted at Christmas time that technically could qualify as public art. This gives us some flexibility to be nimble, to be able to handle things on a temporary basis, to get things up that are not intended to be permanent installations within our parks. So needing to create a mechanism, again, that allowed us to be flexible and nimble so that we can allow those things to happen within the community was the best course that we saw to go forward.
And then I think the other question is, was there any discussion, and maybe you shared this before, about the thinking behind a new advisory committee versus using an existing body or something like the Arts Council? Just a little bit more the why behind that.
Sure. Back in, I think it was the fall, we had outside legal counsel come in and specifically speak to that issue. And it was actually repeated by several outside council members that it is best to have a body that is appointed by the city. In this case, it would be several members appointed by council, by the mayor as well, that actually has accountability to the city, because we're talking about public-owned property and designating as public speech or government speech, public art. When you have an independent organization that does not have that relationship with the city, that would not be a best practice and would, at least if I remember the outside counsel's words, create further opportunity for some potential issues for us down the road. Their recommended for best practices for us was to establish a separate entity that would have appointees by the city to then have some level of accountability to the city.
on that point, however, I do believe outside counsel altered their comments in the minutes when they were meeting, or as reflected in the minutes of the Mayor's Arts Advisory Panel, to say that they would not necessarily make that recommendation, but would not, retracted their earlier comments made before this body.
All I know is in the multiple conversations that I have had in evaluating and formulating this policy, that was the recommendation that I just shared was the recommendation that was shared with me.
Anything further, Ms. Jones?
Yeah, and I'm trying to just think of, I guess, how to ask this. So when this was first brought to us, it was about, ensuring the safety of the art and that this isn't intended to be a content debate. What is, I guess, in this policy, I guess, to prevent that? Is that the added, including and creating the B1 that was added? Does that support that? I guess what I'm trying to, super layman, if art comes to the city that, someone on the committee doesn't feel that we want presented, what in this policy is going to take out personal preference, personal values, and really focus on what the city wants, I guess, is the way I'm trying to ask that. How do we prevent this from being a content bias thing?
You want to, as the program administrator, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's not unlike what other cities do. They have a program administrator. Some of our other cities have whole departments like Dublin, but we can't compare ourselves to Dublin. So that's just, I think I spoke to it last time Mr. Renner asked, my job is to ensure that city policies and procedures are upheld, and that's what I will do in that role. As a program administrator, I will follow this policy, I will follow the procedures that the group puts in, because they will have to create that different criteria and then to which to select the art. And so then when it comes forward, as long as the policies and procedures were followed, the artwork will be installed or whatever, sculptures, whatever it might be.
Director Vollmer, can you explain what the singular criterion-based double-blind evaluation process is? And if I remember correctly, that was actually recommended perhaps by the Arts panel? I don't know if that came from the.
Yeah, it came from the Bright Blocks MOU that the Gahanna Area Arts Council, that's the process they use to evaluate art and make selections. So that ensures that any identifiers for the artist who submitting the proposal is removed. So it is actually a blind process. It's the same process we use when we score our request for proposals or request for qualifications under the city's procurement policy.
And then as the administrator, that's the final decision, even if it might be a different decision than what the committee, like, I guess where's the final decision?
I think it's stated in the,
Okay, sorry if I'm not understanding. that.
it is on page 2, section C. City through its program administrator shall make final determinations on recommendations received from the
Okay.
committee.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. McGregor?
One of the things I like about this is that, is that this group is responsible to elected officials. Because I think this is one problem, a good example is the post office. There's no elected official that oversees that office. It's a quasi-governmental function. And so to give the responsibility of this policy to somebody who is not responsible back to an elected official, in my mind, is kind of a slippery slope, that's not a way to go.
Can I?
City Attorney?
Yes, thank you. So, first of all, Mrs. McGregor is exactly right. If we were to delegate our ability to choose art to an outside entity, it would create a quasi-governmental entity anyway. And the crux of this policy is to create government speech, which means the speech of the government. And so whoever is selecting that has to speak for the city. And so it is probably best practice to create a committee that has appointees to represent the community and to represent the government in order to speak, which would be the crux of this policy. But to that end, I want to make clear that in the policy, as has been shared with you, we do reserve the right to be selective about art based on content. I just want to make that very clear, that is the definition of government speech, is that we have the right to say no to something. And by creating it as government speech, it is, in essence, a content policy. But the policy is to have a content-neutral selection of art, but we have to reserve the right to screen that and to have the administration have the final say, or else it would not be government speech. Does that clarify the question? Sorry, just wanted to add that.
Thank you, City Attorney. Mr. Schnetzer?
Thank you so much, Madam City Attorney, for that clarification. It's been one of the lingering questions that I've had while we've been discussing this, and I'm wondering, and I don't know who best, if this is the administration would be best equipped to answer this, or maybe it is Madam City Attorney herself. I'm trying to think of how this will actually function from the standpoint of, is it intended that the city will solicit art, meaning they will define a site, they will say, here are the general parameters that we're considering, or does this policy, for lack of a better word, take on a life of its own in the sense that anyone out there could come to the city and say, we want to do this? And I'll just turn my cards up. I think my preference, and the preference of most people in this community, would be that the city defines where they want the public art to be placed, as opposed to being bombarded with asks or requests, from those outside, the community potentially. So I'm just curious how this would actually function.
So under the policy, it can be both ways. That's why you see the acquisition of art as a direct purchase or donation. My understanding from attending the Mayor's Advisory Council is the way in which that group wrote their policy, which we had edited onto here, is that, yes, the city would have funds set aside to solicit art for a very specific project at a very specific location, and then this panel would then receive all of the proposals from those that wish to put art at that designated area, and then they would use their process to score it. They'd make a recommendation, and then it would move on to the program administrator for final determination, and then I would work with Department of Parks and Recreation if it was in a park to then get it installed and maintained.
So I'm going to throw out just like a wacky example, just to highlight something that, I guess I'll throw out, again, an absurd example just for discussion here. Say somebody wants to paint a mural on the side of City Hall.
Okay.
If they come to the city and they say, we want to paint a mural on the side of City Hall, what happens? Does this committee have to meet
No,
and debate that, or can they be stopped and turned away immediately?
I believe they can be stopped.
Okay.
Yeah, so under page 2, section B, the PAC shall perform the following functions: review and make recommendations to the city's program administrator regarding the approval of submissions to be displayed. So, and to provide input on the selection of sites for public art. The way I envision this happening is once the group gets up and established and creates their procedures, which I'm sure you all know is going to take a few minutes to do that, and once money becomes available, this group and through the city would actively solicit that art for specific places. So then when those requests come in, we are not accepting solicitations for the side of our brand-new city hall.
Okay, so essentially there would be a menu, there'd be a list of
Yeah.
sites, there'd be a list of concepts, I guess, for, again, lack
Correct.
of a better word. And if somebody wants to participate in that, then they move through the process. But if it's not on that list or that menu, so to speak, then they're just turned away.
Correct, unless it's some wonderful thing we haven't thought of, or it makes sense, or something like that.
All right, thank you.
Ms. Padova?
So, with the new temporary art being within 6 months, I know you used the Storybook Trail as an example. Is that there less than 6 months? I thought it was there for a whole year.
It would be in this case because largely, number one, in the wintertime, nobody's on the trails as much that way, but we would also look to expand that program and switch out the artwork.
Okay. And then what about the bright blocks? Because I've heard a year, I've heard 2 years, but I haven't heard 6 months.
Yes, so we're actively working with the Arts Council right now to establish a 2024 program, because we're in between when this policy is going to go to effect and them needing to start. And so we have an upcoming meeting with them on Friday to discuss the locations for that throughout the park system, and then the length of time in which that would be displayed. So moving into 25, if it's more than 6 months, they would need to go through this process, through the PAC, to get those approved.
So
So for 2025, the bright blocks would go through this process.
We're
Arguably.
anticipating they'll be up at least a year at this point.
Right.
Okay, but not until next year's Creekside would they have to go through this process?
Correct, because the project's in between, so we're working with the
Okay.
Arts Council to establish an MOU that has some of this criteria built into it, similar to some of the criteria they use for their prior programs.
Okay. And do we know now how many bright blocks we have currently?
Yes, Superintendent Guthrie and I met with Mr. Peck from the Arts Council on last Friday. We identified some damaged bright blocks. We're going to give the artists an opportunity to fix those so they can go up. And then we're establishing dates for the artists to come in, for them to be weatherized, for them to be installed.
Okay. And do we know how many there are?
There's around 40.
Okay. So will all of those go into the parks this
As
summer?
We are working towards that goal, yes.
Okay.
Ms. Bowers?
Thank you. Are there two paths to art becoming government speech now in Gahanna? That we have an administrative path through the PAC, and we have a council path through resolution like we did last year? Are those two paths still viable?
Yes.
And I guess to that question, if we were, say, installing art in council chambers, is that a council prerogative? I mean, would that, I mean, we could, that would be an option to go through a council resolution process?
Yes.
I would.
Sorry, also, if council or the city solicits and purchases art, that is government speech
Okay,
already.
all right. So if we were to go out and commission it, and the city as an entity were to commission art that takes it out of this process altogether, potentially?
Well, this is how the administration is proposing to solicit and acquire art.
I see.
If council were to pass a resolution to acquire a piece of art or to commission a piece of art, then that would also be government speech.
Okay, thank you.
It would be my strong recommendation for liability purposes that if this is the policy we go with, even if you do that, it still needs to go through here. So everybody's treated with equity in how we are putting art in on public property. Because otherwise you have two different criteria that you're using.
Thank you, Director Vollmer.
Ms. Padova?
I think you may have answered this, but I just want to ask again. So would this group be like proactive in like finding areas where they think public art should be, or would they just be kind of there if, with City Hall being redone, I'm sure there will be art in there. Would they be in charge of finding all of the art that goes into the new City Hall? I guess
So under Part B, the PAC, one of their functions is to provide input in the selection of sites for public art.
But would they like meet proactively and say, we think that there should be art, I don't know, somewhere at Creekside or at a park? Like, would they proactively come up with ideas of where public art should be and solicit it? Or would they only be doing it in meeting if the administration is actively
It'd be
seeking
the
it?
goal that the PAC's bringing forward those selection sites
Okay.
to help us determine where to put art in the different parts of the city.
So they would be proactively looking for things without the administration seeking them?
We would be working together to do that. So there would be agendas created after the body gets established and their procedures are in. If there's money available for public art, then we need to find selection sites for that art and work towards having a list of where art might be at in the city.
Okay. So would they be meeting
They'd ha-
regularly, not just in?
They could. They'd have to
Okay.
establish that as part of their procedures, that they meet monthly or quarterly or whatever some of it will dictate, we know certain things might come through, so that might dictate a meeting schedule. You can always schedule a meeting and cancel it if there is nothing to discuss. There will be quite a few meetings at the front to establish the procedures for the body.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Bowers?
Yeah, on that note, on the establishment of procedures for the body, so we've had a lot of discussion about creating subcommittees or bodies that, depending on who they report to and that kind of thing. So I understand that because this is reporting to an internal administrator and not to an elected body, that these will not be subject to public notice.
Correct.
But I do note in here that there are voting members and non-voting members. So it would be my strong preference that there be minutes or note-taking coming out of the PAC meetings. And so I would ask that be strongly considered. Okay.
Thank you for the suggestion. Appreciate that.
Mr. Renner?
Thank you. Director, I really appreciate you standing up there and responding to all these questions. I just want to go to the function of that body. It's a 5-member body, and you're going to basically chair it for all intents and purposes. Is that right?
I will be the staff to it, kind of similar to how
Staff, okay.
Director Blackford is staff to the Planning Commission.
And so, all right, but, under this document, that you'll still make the final decision. And so my question really is, if it's a 3-2 vote to have a designated art or whatever it is, you're going to go with that recommendation or no?
As long as the recommendation meets all the city's policies and procedures.
That'll be
So-
set up by this PAC.
Correct. So it's more like an RFP process, not like maybe a vote on a selection site, but when the art is actually being solicited and come back, when it goes through that criterion, just like a RFP process, the scores are tabulated, and it's somebody wins per se or gets selected because they have the highest score.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Director. Couple of quick things. I'm happy to hear that you are working with the Arts Council in the interim, knowing that they've done a lot of the front leg work and had worked with the city attorney, a previous city attorney, as well as our Parks Department for the Bright Block projects, among others, historically. Good thing they had that MOU in place historically that we were able to draw from. I did have a couple questions on the policy. Under section 2B, I think this is just in reference to, but I think it's a general comment that PAC members should not be, representing themselves essentially before the PAC. But the language around shouldn't be answering questions. Would an applicant be going before the PAC, or would basically the city gather any material, you as program administrator gather any materials and then present that to the PAC? Would there ever be an interaction between an applicant, for lack of a better word, and the PAC?
There could be, yeah.
But according to the guidance here, it looks like they should not be answering any questions.
It would be more in the line that there are, let's call it 2 finalists for something. If the PAC wants to ask those folks questions, they could bring them in for like an interview type scenario.
Okay. Thank you. So, I'm just trying to walk through the steps here.
And I'm sure, as most policies are, they're living and breathing documents. So as we move on, there is likely that there is going to need to be changes to address something we couldn't think of, because it's impossible to think of all the scenarios.
Absolutely, and I appreciate all the work that's gone into this, be it from the administration, be it from the Mayor's Arts Advisory Panel, yeoman's work, and it is appreciated. And, we get a few opportunities for comment, and so I appreciate you taking the time to answer those questions and hear us out. Madam Mayor.
I was just, with regard to your question about PAC members not answering questions. So again, if this is a situation where the city is soliciting artwork, they've asked the PAC, they've engaged the PAC to go out and help to solicit artwork, and then you have individual artists calling individual PAC members asking for advice on how to submit artwork or what to do, and then that piece of artwork comes back before the PAC, it becomes an inappropriate conversation.
That's what I'm envisioning the intent of that section was?
That's the intent of that, is to avoid that inappropriate, make sure we protect the propriety of the situation, of the process.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, for the clarification. Under the administration section, number 1 mentions that the terms would begin January 2nd. Is the intent to wait on any appointments until that time, or as we approach the new year, or an interim? Is the goal to get this up and running as
The goal is
quickly
to
as
get this up
possible?
and running. It's my intent to have this policy adopted in effect by May 1, and then work toward the formation of the committee. I think going forward, January 2nd would be just the tip, that would be consistent with the boards and commission timeframes for all of our other board members. But for this initial run is to get it up and running as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Mayor. Director, you had mentioned living, breathing document, laws and sausages, as the saying goes, right? I'm somewhat familiar with the state's JCAR process, the Joint Committee on Agency Rule Review. Is there a time period that the city has generally when we know every 2 years we review all the city's policies, or I'm unaware of the city's process, so I'm asking if we have a general process on reviewing city policies.
So as it stands right now, if you turn to page 3, under history, the review frequency is as needed. If you, so our policies have different lengths depending on what they are. So if you have a recommendation, I'm happy to add that in. Typically review, like, a lot of the HR policies and IT policies that I work on are on typically a 2-year, sometime 2 to 5 year cycle.
Thank you. At our last discussion on this, and I appreciate the added line on, in terms of ensuring compliance with applicable zoning code and procedures. I'd asked a question to basically flesh out how that process in terms of the zoning code versus the PAC would actually work. I know there's a provision in here about designating, perhaps a private business at Creekside does their own solicitation for a mural at Creekside for their business, and then the city might want to designate that as public art, and what the steps of how that process would look like. If I'm Joe business owner and I want to get a mural on the side of my building, I would go to Director Blackford's shop, I'm assuming, at the outset, because zoning code and ensure compliance there.
That is correct.
And so then, I'm assuming somewhere in City Hall, there's a conversation between Director Blackford and maybe you as the program administrator saying, hey, let's get this designated as public art. I'm trying to follow the steps here of how someone navigates this.
Yeah, so I think the start would be in the Department of Planning, and then we would work together if somebody's interested in having it designated as public art, because then it would need to go through this policy. Because then we would need, then the PAC would need to approve the artwork design, make a recommendation to be approved, and then at that point, if it's designated as we're trying to make this a public art mural, I would help facilitate the zoning code process, because it will still have to go through the zoning code and planning commission and be subject to the zoning code, color restrictions. If it's a cheeseburger shop and they put a cheeseburger on the side of their building, now it's a sign. So there are, those steps of the zoning code would have to be followed if it's a public art mural or if it's just a private business owner, Joe, trying to repaint the side of said building. That stuff has to go through the zoning code.
Okay. Thank you. Trying to go through my questions here. I understand this policy is laser focused on the, for lack of a better word, the content moderation component of arts policies. I would be remiss to not note that I believe the panel made additional recommendations that they believe, I should say the Mayor's Arts Advisory Panel made additional recommendations that they believed were within the mayor's scope. I understand we were the focus is on doing this component. I think those additional components are worthy of discussion and would love to see those at a future date. View this as a step one. But I think that's all that I have for right now. Ms. Jones.
One more question. In terms of the process, so let's say we are commissioning, the city has commissioned someone to do art. Is there a process, and that's before the art exists, right? Is there a process as the art is being developed? Like if we approve, we commission them, is it cool, done, whatever the end result of the art is, it goes up? Or is there process as the art is being actually created and developed?
So through the process, when the PAC selects the artist, one of the selection is they have a
Sample?
they have a sample of a rough sketch of what that's going to be, and that's no different than what the Arts Council does with Bright Blocks.
Okay.
They see what the artist said they were going to paint. They look at the panels to see if that's what the artist painted, and so that way you can ensure compliance throughout the process.
Okay, thank you.
That's different than what I thought the Bright Blocks process was, but I'll have to,
You're welcome to talk to Mr. Peck. Him and I discussed that in depth, that's how that works, because when we just looked at the Bright Blocks, he mentioned a couple things, like this wasn't on the original design that they submitted to us, but we approved it. So that is absolutely what he conveyed to me, that the process that they use is.
okay, all right, thank you.
Should that be in here somewhere? I mean, I know, I guess you talked about, you've mentioned a couple times that, well, I guess, is that covered in the criterion-based double-blind evaluation process? That includes all of that?
Correct. When you put out the solicitation for artwork, it would have all of the details in. For example, the city of Hilliard has a project with their traffic signal boxes. They're all sunflower themed. So you can go on Hilliard's website. You can see that they, not right now, but when they did, we're putting sunflower theme on our traffic cabinet boxes. If you'd like to submit a proposal, here's how you do so.
Any further discussion on this item? Okay. Again, thank you, Director. Thank you, Madam Mayor, and City Attorney, for your efforts and your review on this. Been a long time coming. I was going through previous meeting minutes on the topic, and it looks like May 1st of last year was when we first had a discussion in here about the murals under the bridge.
As I said, I wanted this to be a community-informed policy. That took a little longer than perhaps any of us wanted, but we got there. Again, this is an administrative policy, and I know that the city attorney and outside counsel and I had many conversations at the time, and I could have just drafted a policy and put it in place, but I really wanted to make sure I worked with council and the community as well.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I think just my final comment on this would be, may not be the ideal that I would be seeking, but as the city attorney has indicated, it is the most legally defensible, most cautious approach. And I think that is all my comments. Okay. Thank you. Not done yet, folks. A couple more items here. Items from council office. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is the Ohio Division of Liquor Control notice for JMJ FM LLC doing business as La Navona and Patios. What this application entails is a change of LLC membership interests. I did forward this to the administration and the Division of Police. There were no objections.
Any discussion from my colleagues? All right. Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Next up, we have a resolution celebrating Mother's Day on May 12th and recognizing the indispensable role of motherful in sharing our community. I believe Ms. Padova for this item.
Thank you. So thank you to Jeremy for helping me get this put together here. I think we all would agree that Mother's Day is an important holiday and important in all of our lives. I have invited Motherful to come to be here for the presentation for this resolution. Being a local nonprofit supporting single mothers, it is very much an organization worth recognizing on this day. So if there's any questions, let me know.
Any discussion, Mrs. McGregor?
I fully support a resolution honoring Mother's Day. I object to Motherful being included because I looked at their website and they really have some politically objectionable, to me, views, particularly on the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. They have some artwork displayed that is anti-police, and there may be some, I think this is really bringing politics into a Mother's Day resolution, and I strongly object to this being part of the resolution.
Additional comments on this? Mr. Renner? I'm sorry.
I will just say that I didn't know anything about Motherful until tonight, so.
I will say, the core of what Motherful does is to advocate for and support a sect of motherhood that's often forgotten. And so I appreciate you bringing that. I also speak bias as a child of a single mother and recognize that organizations like Motherful really catering to that sect don't exist, especially, not in the Ohio area. So I appreciate that.
And I would agree if they just supported single motherhood, and they probably do good things, but to add more stuff into it on their website gave me great pause.
I have not seen that on their website, but
Is the local involved, Kaylee? Do you know?
It's a local organization.
Oh,
not
it's a local
national.
Gahanna organization, or is it a? Oh,
yeah, they're over on Agler Road at the, what is it, the youth center? I'm not really sure what we do.
well,
Anything else, Mr. Renner?
if I could, I don't want to put words in mouth of my colleague, Councilwoman Jones, but if I think I hear, she's trying to dissect a little bit that there are instances of motherhood that Motherful is actually talking about, maybe in some of these stranger spaces that we are used to.
I'd be more than happy to work with you on some revisions.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Bowers, for your willingness to do that, and Ms. Padova, thank you, everybody, for your comments. That said, perhaps we slate this for the regular, well, let's see, hold on, Mother's Day is the 12th. We can put it on the regular agenda for the 6th, and assuming there's been some corrections made to folks' liking. Will that work for
Yeah.
Mrs. McGregor?
Yeah.
We'll see. I'll see what we can do.
I was just thinking, it's not that, I'm a mother of 5. I have 3 in-law children, 9 grandchildren. It's not that, I support motherhood. And often I think to single moms and the work they have to do it all. They do the mother and the father part. And I totally support and realize how hard their job is. I just think this what they have, I don't know, it's just, it's not that I don't support them, it's just this organization and the things they had on their website are of a great concern to me.
In the alternative, we could always come back to committee, and it would be a belated Mother's Day resolution if we aimed for the 20th.
Let's,
Ms. Bowers.
I had not, thank you for raising some of this to our attention, and thank you, Kaylee, for raising the work, the local work that Motherful does to support single mothers as part of their mission statement to our attention, which is certainly, I think, not the objection here. There is a area of self-expression part on their website, and the section there is not signed by Motherful. It is signed by members of the organization. So we can perhaps distinguish between what Motherful does and its support of single mothers, potentially. We can see what we can do.
I would just ask that we also are very clear with that conversation with Motherful and ensuring that they have the option to, I want them to be clear of this conversation that they have and that they don't feel like by showing up that they have to go back on what they might think or believe or anything like that. So I think that we just need to ensure that they have an option of, as anyone would, it's whether they want to accept or not.
So is the will then to leave it on the regular agenda for the 6th? Okay. All right, well, thank you, Ms. Bedova, for putting this together and for your work on this, and Ms. Bowers for your willingness to work with Ms. Bedova. All right, anything else for the committee?
No.
Seeing nothing further, we will adjourn for the evening. Thank you very much, everybody.